Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to today's story. After Emma saved the man from the river, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The paramedics had taken him away, and the city quickly resumed its usual hum. But for Emma, the events of the afternoon replayed in her mind like a film on loop. She had never been one to act on impulse, especially not with strangers. Yet, without thinking, she had thrown herself into the river without a second thought, pulling him to safety. She couldn't explain it. It wasn't like her at all. Maybe it was just the desperation she saw in his eyes, or maybe it was the sudden realization that life can change in an instant. Whatever it was, Emma couldn't ignore it. The following morning, she found herself sitting at her desk, staring blankly at the financial reports in front of her. The numbers blurred together, and the sound of the keyboard clicking in the background felt distant. Her mind kept wandering back to the man she had rescued, wondering if he was okay. She had tried to reach the hospital, but they wouldn't give her any information. All she knew was that his name was Alexander, and he had been unconscious when they took him in. Her curiosity about him only grew. He was a mystery, and Emma, with her usual level-headedness, wanted to know more. That afternoon, she found herself walking to the same riverbank where she had pulled him from the water. The sky was clear now, and the air felt fresh. She stood there for a moment, taking in the view, trying to clear her thoughts. Just as she was about to leave, she heard a voice behind her. "You again," the voice said, almost amused. Emma turned around to find Alexander standing there, looking much better than he had the day before. His clothes were dry, his hair was neatly combed, and his face, though still a little pale, showed signs of life. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. She had expected him to be grateful, maybe overwhelmed with thanks, but he wasn't. He just stood there, studying her, as if trying to figure out what kind of person she was. Finally, he spoke again. "I owe you my life." His voice was deep, almost gravelly, but there was a sincerity to it that Emma hadn't expected. She didn't know how to respond. She wasn't the kind of person who sought recognition for what she did. But something about his tone, something about the way he was looking at her, made her feel like this moment was important. "You don't owe me anything," she replied, shrugging it off. "I just did what anyone would do." But Alexander wasn't satisfied with that. He took a step closer to her, his gaze never leaving hers. "No," he said firmly. "I don't think you understand. You saved me. And I'm not someone who lets a debt go unpaid." Emma felt a slight discomfort at his words. She wasn't sure what he meant, but his intensity was undeniable. It wasn't just gratitude. There was something more to his tone, something that felt personal. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Alexander hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his words. Then he said, "I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like I'm meant to return the favor. I don't take things like this lightly." Emma was starting to feel a little uneasy. She had never been one to deal with situations like this, and Alexander's presence was starting to unsettle her. But at the same time, she couldn't deny that there was something magnetic about him. His presence was commanding, and there was a quiet intensity in the way he carried himself. "I don't want anything from you," she said, her voice firm. "I'm glad you're okay, but that's all I need." Alexander didn't seem deterred by her words. In fact, he looked even more determined. "Maybe not now," he said, his eyes narrowing. "But you will. You'll see." Before Emma could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, more confused than ever. As the days passed, Emma couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. She knew it wasn't just her imagination. There was something about Alexander that was different, something that drew her in. But she couldn't put her finger on it. Her life had been simple, predictable, until now. And now, she wasn't so sure about anything anymore. Was she just overthinking it? Or was there something more to this connection she had with a man she barely knew? Only time would tell. But Emma had a feeling that her world was about to be turned upside down. The following days were a blur for Emma. She went back to her routine, but her thoughts constantly drifted to Alexander. There was something about him she couldn't shake off. Despite her efforts to focus on her work and her usual activities, her mind kept returning to the brief encounter they had by the river. She had never met anyone quite like him, so intense, so insistent, and yet there was something undeniably magnetic about him. Emma tried to convince herself it was just a momentary curiosity, but deep down, she knew there was more to it. As the weekend approached, Emma found herself walking to a small cafe near her apartment. It had become a kind of sanctuary for her, a quiet place where she could escape from the demands of work and think. She sat down at a table by the window, ordered her usual coffee, and began reading a book she had started weeks ago. But she couldn't concentrate. Her mind kept wandering back to Alexander, and this time, she couldn't ignore it any longer. She needed to understand why she couldn't stop thinking about him. Just as she was about to close her book and leave, she heard a familiar voice. "Mind if I join you?" Emma looked up and found Alexander standing by her table. He was dressed in a sharp suit, looking every bit the businessman, yet there was still that raw intensity about him that seemed to radiate from within. Emma hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do. She had been thinking about him, but this was unexpected. She hadn't expected to see him again, let alone in a place so personal to her. "I thought you might be here," he said, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Mind if I sit down?" Emma looked around the cafe. It was a small, quiet place, and the last thing she needed was to make a scene. But there was something in his eyes, something that made her feel like she didn't have a choice. She nodded, motioning for him to take the empty chair across from her. Alexander sat down, his gaze still fixed on her, almost as if he was studying her. Emma felt a slight discomfort at how intense his focus was, but she couldn't help feeling a strange pull toward him. "So," Alexander began, breaking the silence, "how have you been? Is work treating you well?" Emma nodded, though she wasn't sure why he was asking. She had no idea what kind of relationship they even had. Was he just grateful? Or was there something more to his interest? "Work's fine," she said, trying to keep the conversation casual. "Same as usual. You know, just busy." Alexander didn't seem satisfied with the answer. His eyes never left hers, and she could feel the weight of his stare. "That's good," he said slowly. "But I can't help but wonder, why are you still thinking about me?" Emma felt her pulse quicken. She hadn't expected him to be so direct. I'm not, she replied quickly, then paused, realizing how defensive she sounded. It's just, it was a big thing. Saving someone's life. It kind of sticks with you. Alexander leaned in slightly, his expression serious. You're not being honest with yourself, Emma, he said, his voice low but steady. You've been thinking about me because there's something between us. And you know it. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure how to respond. He was right in some ways, she had been thinking about him non-stop. But that didn't mean there was anything more to it. I don't know what you mean, she said quietly, though her voice lacked conviction. Alexander gave a small, knowing smile. You will, he said, leaning back in his chair. You're just not ready to admit it yet? There was a moment of silence, and Emma felt the tension between them grow. She didn't know what was happening, but she was beginning to feel like she was walking a fine line. She wasn't sure where this connection was going, but it felt undeniable. I don't want anything from you, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I helped you. That's it. Alexander stared at her for a moment before standing up. Maybe, he said, his voice soft but firm. But you'll see, Emma. You won't be able to avoid this. The more you try to ignore it, the stronger it will get. With that, he turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving Emma sitting there, her heart racing. She couldn't deny it anymore. There was something between them. Something she couldn't understand, but couldn't ignore either. She didn't know what it meant or where it was leading, but one thing was certain, her life was about to change in ways she hadn't imagined. Emma couldn't stop thinking about Alexander. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his piercing gaze, the intensity in his voice, the way he told her there was something between them. She tried to shake it off, but it clung to her like a shadow. It had only been a few days since that encounter in the cafe, but she felt as if her life was beginning to tilt off balance. She had always been in control, her life neatly compartmentalized into work, friends, and her quiet moments of solitude. But now, she was becoming unmoored. She hadn't heard from Alexander since that day, and part of her was relieved. She wasn't sure how to handle the connection he claimed was between them, but another part of her was disappointed. She wasn't sure what she wanted, only that she didn't feel completely at ease without some sort of resolution. The days passed, and Emma tried to keep busy. She threw herself into her work, spending long hours at the office, but nothing seemed to hold her attention. Her mind kept drifting back to Alexander, wondering what he was doing, why he had come to the cafe, and why he was so determined that there was something more between them. She told herself it was just a passing fascination, but deep down, she knew it was more than that. One evening, after yet another long day at the office, Emma decided to take a walk. She needed some air, some space to think. The streets of New York were alive with energy, the sounds of the city filling the air, but Emma felt distant from it all. As she walked down the familiar streets, she found herself, once again, at the river. The same place where it all began. She hadn't intended to come here, but now that she was standing on the edge, staring at the water, it felt like the right place to be. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs. That was when she heard it. You just can't stay away, can you? Emma's heart skipped a beat. She turned, and there he was, Alexander, standing behind her with that same unreadable expression on his face. This time, though, he wasn't wearing a suit. He was dressed casually, but he still carried himself with that same commanding presence. I didn't expect to see you again, Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. But then again, I guess I'm not really surprised. Alexander smiled, the corners of his mouth turning up slightly. I knew you'd be here, he said. I've been thinking about you. Emma's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean? She asked, trying to keep her composure. Alexander stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. I mean that I've been thinking about you a lot. I can't stop thinking about the fact that you saved my life. You don't even know me, and yet you risked everything for a stranger. That says something about you, Emma. It says you're the kind of person who does things without expecting anything in return. And I can't ignore that. His words struck her like a punch. She had never thought of herself that way, had never considered that her actions would mean so much to someone. But hearing him say it made her feel exposed, like he had seen something deep inside her that she hadn't even fully realized. I don't expect anything from you, Emma replied quietly. I did what anyone would have done. Alexander shook his head slowly, his expression softening. No, he said firmly. You don't get it. What you did for me wasn't just about saving my life. It's about something bigger than that. It's about a connection, one I can't explain, but I feel it. And I think you feel it too. Emma felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. She didn't know what to say. She wanted to argue with him, to tell him that this was all in his head, that there was no connection, but deep down, she knew he was right. She had felt something that day when she pulled him from the water. She had felt it when she saw him again at the cafe. There was something between them, something neither of them could explain, but something undeniable. She took a step back, trying to create some distance between them. I don't know what you want from me, Alexander, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I saved your life. That's all. I don't want anything else. Alexander's gaze never wavered. I don't want anything from you, Emma, he said softly. Not yet. But I can't walk away from this, from whatever this is. I think you feel it too. And I think we should explore it. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Emma didn't know what to make of it, but she couldn't deny that she was drawn to him. The pull was there, stronger than she wanted to admit. What does that even mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander smiled again, this time with more certainty. It means, he said, that I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you. Emma stood there, caught between fear and something else, something she couldn't yet name. She didn't know where this would lead, but she knew one thing for certain, her life, as she had known it, was about to change forever. Emma stood still, her heart pounding in her chest, as Alexander's words echoed in her mind. I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you. She wanted to step back, to dismiss what he was saying, to tell him that he was wrong. But something inside her resisted. She had been running from this connection, trying to ignore it, but it was like trying to fight the tide, it always pulled her back in. Alexander's presence was undeniable, and no matter how much she tried to convince herself otherwise, she couldn't deny the magnetic pull between them. For a moment, there was a heavy silence between them, the sound of the river rushing nearby and the city's hum far off in the distance. Emma wasn't sure how to respond. She had always prided herself on being in control, on knowing exactly what to say, when to say it. But Alexander was different. She had never met anyone like him before, someone who made her feel as if everything she knew was being turned upside down. She opened her mouth to speak, but her words got stuck. How could she explain this feeling, this strange, intense pull toward him? She barely understood it herself. Alexander seemed to sense her hesitation, and for a brief moment, his expression softened. "You don't have to say anything, Emma," he said quietly. "I can see it in your eyes. You don't want to admit it, but you're as drawn to me as I am to you." Emma didn't know how to respond to that. Was it true? Could she really feel the same way? Or was she just being swept up in the intensity of the moment? She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I don't know what this is," she said, her voice shaky. "I don't know what you want from me." Alexander reached out, his hand hovering just above hers, as if he was waiting for her to make the next move. "I don't want anything from you, Emma." "Not yet," he said, his voice low and steady. "But I need you to understand something. Whatever this is between us, it's real. And I won't walk away from it. I don't expect you to understand right away, but I need you to trust me." Emma's mind raced. She wanted to pull away, to reject everything he was saying, but she couldn't. The truth was, she was terrified of what would happen if she let herself get too close to him. She had built her life on being independent, on keeping things simple and safe. But Alexander was like a storm, unpredictable and powerful. And part of her wanted to let herself be swept away by it. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for some kind of answer, some kind of clarity. "I'm not sure I can trust you," she said quietly. Alexander's expression didn't change, but there was something in his eyes, something vulnerable, something that made Emma pause. "I'm not asking you to trust me right away," he said softly. "I just want you to give me a chance. To let me prove that I'm not here to hurt you. I want to understand this too." The sincerity in his voice, the way he looked at her, made her feel like she was standing on the edge of something monumental. She had always played it safe, kept her emotions locked away, but now she was being asked to take a leap into the unknown. And for the first time in a long time, she was considering it. "What if this is all just a mistake?" she whispered. "What if I'm making everything worse?" Alexander shook his head, his gaze unwavering. "I don't think it's a mistake," he said firmly. "I think it's the opposite. I think we've both been waiting for something like this to happen. And now it's here. You can't run from it, and neither can I." Emma felt a shiver run down her spine. He was right. She couldn't run from it. There was something about him, something that had awakened a part of her she hadn't even known existed. She was scared, but she was also curious. Curious about what would happen if she gave in, if she allowed herself to feel whatever this was. She looked at him, her heart racing in her chest, and for the first time, she didn't pull away. Instead, she took a small step forward, closing the distance between them. Alexander's eyes softened, and for a moment, they just stood there, silently acknowledging the shift between them. "I'm not going to push you, Emma," he said quietly. "But I won't back down either. Just know that I'm here. Whenever you're ready." Emma didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know where this was leading, or if it would work out at all. But in that moment, standing by the river with Alexander, she made a choice. She wasn't going to run anymore. Not from him. Not from what they were. She didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to face the unknown. Emma felt a sense of calm wash over her as she stood there, her heart still racing, yet more at ease than she had been in weeks. The decision she had just made, to run, to face whatever this was with Alexander, was the first time in a long while she felt like she was truly acting on her own terms. It was strange. She had always been careful, controlled, and above all, independent. She had kept her emotions in check, put her career first, and told herself she was better off alone. But Alexander, his presence, his quiet determination, it stirred something inside her. Something she hadn't realized was missing. She had always believed that control was the key to her happiness, that staying distant and focused was what kept her safe. But in that moment, with Alexander standing before her, she realized she had been hiding behind walls for far too long. She wasn't sure what this was between them, but she was ready to find out. The next few days were a blur. Alexander kept his word, he didn't push her. But his presence lingered, a constant in the back of her mind. He reached out occasionally, sending a text or a brief call, never asking for too much, just checking in. There was something about his approach that felt different. Unlike the men she had dated in the past, who had been aggressive or overbearing in their pursuit, Alexander was patient, almost too patient. It was as if he already understood the pace she needed. She appreciated that, more than she could explain. The following weekend, he invited her to dinner. It was a casual invitation, just a quiet meal at a local restaurant, no pressure. He made it clear it was just for them, no work talk, no distractions, just two people getting to know each other. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready for another step, but then she realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. She had already let him in, at least a little. So she agreed. Dinner was simple, but there was something in the way they talked, the way they looked at each other, that made the evening feel more significant than it should have. They talked about everything, her career, his travels, the quirky things they'd noticed about New York, even childhood memories. The conversation flowed easily, and Emma felt herself relaxing, laughing at his dry humor, enjoying his company in a way she hadn't allowed herself to enjoy anyone's company in years. When the night came to an end, Alexander walked her to her apartment. The air was crisp, the city lights sparkling against the backdrop of a clear night sky. As they reached her door, she turned to face him, unsure of what to say. "Thank you for tonight," she said quietly. "It was nice." He smiled, his eyes warm but guarded. "I'm glad you enjoyed it," he said. Then, after a pause, he added, "I told you I wouldn't push you, Emma. But I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here." His words were simple, but there was an underlying weight to them, a promise, a truth that Emma could feel deep in her bones. She wanted to respond, to say something, but she couldn't find the words. Instead, she just nodded, her heart beating a little faster than before. She wasn't ready to say goodbye to this feeling yet. And as she stepped into her apartment, she realized something. She wasn't just thinking about him anymore. She was thinking about them, about what this could be. She didn't know if it was love. She wasn't sure if it was even possible. But what she did know was that she was willing to find out. The next few days felt different. Emma found herself waking up with a strange sense of anticipation, a feeling that something was changing, even if she couldn't name it yet. Alexander's texts, his calls, the way he checked in, it all felt like something was slowly building between them. And she realized that she wasn't as afraid as she had been before. She wasn't afraid of him, or the connection they had, or even what might come next. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was ready for whatever came next. She had spent so long building walls around herself, hiding behind routines and control, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to just be, to experience life without constantly second-guessing every decision. But with Alexander, it was different. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't asking for more than she was ready to give. He was just there, and somehow, that was enough. Emma didn't have all the answers. She didn't know what the future held. But she knew one thing for sure, she was no longer running from it. She was stepping forward, taking it one moment at a time, and for the first time in ages, that felt like enough. The days after that evening were a blur of emotions for Emma. She was trying to balance her life, her job, and this new connection with Alexander, but it was becoming harder to ignore the growing tension between them. It wasn't that she didn't want it, on the contrary, there was something about him that felt almost inevitable. The way he listened to her, the way he didn't push, but still, she could feel his presence, like a constant pull in the back of her mind. She couldn't deny it any longer, she was falling for him. But something inside her was still holding back. She wasn't sure what it was. Fear? Doubt? Or was it simply the weight of the past, the life she had built for herself that had always been so carefully controlled? Whatever it was, it felt like a barrier she couldn't quite cross. Alexander, on the other hand, seemed to sense it. He was patient, almost unnervingly so, but Emma could tell he wasn't blind to the fact that she was struggling with something. He never pushed her, but his eyes always held a quiet intensity, as if he was waiting for her to catch up, to meet him halfway. It was the evening of the next weekend when everything came to a head. They had planned to meet for dinner, a casual outing at a new restaurant Emma had been dying to try. The night was cool, with a slight breeze that brushed through the city streets as they walked toward the restaurant. Emma was nervous, but this time it wasn't the usual nerves. There was something different about this night, something she couldn't place. When they arrived, the atmosphere inside was warm, cozy, with soft lighting and a quiet hum of conversation. They were seated by the window, looking out at the city lights. The conversation flowed easily, as it always did with Alexander. They talked about everything, their work, their favorite movies, their childhood memories. It was comfortable, but there was an underlying current of something more between them, something that Emma couldn't ignore. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her whenever she wasn't looking, and it made her heart race in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. She tried to focus on the conversation, but her mind kept drifting to him, to them. Was she ready for this? For something real? Or was she simply afraid to lose the control she had worked so hard to build? As dinner came to an end, Alexander reached across the table, his hand resting lightly on hers. "Emma," he said, his voice low but steady, "I need to ask you something." She looked at him, surprised. His gaze was serious now, his expression softened with something deeper than she had seen before. "What is it?" she asked, her heart pounding. "I know you're holding back," he said softly. "I can see it. And I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. I'm not here for a fling, Emma. I'm here for something real. But I need you to meet me halfway. I need you to let go of whatever it is that's keeping you from trusting me completely." Emma's breath caught in her throat. His words hit her harder than she expected. She had been holding back, hadn't she? She had built walls around herself for so long, afraid to let anyone in. And here he was, asking her to take the leap, to trust him, to take a step into the unknown with him. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, she knew that she couldn't keep living in fear of it. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can trust again." Alexander's eyes softened, and he squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," he said quietly. "I'm not asking you to figure everything out tonight. I just want you to know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." The weight of his words settled over her, and for the first time, Emma didn't feel the need to escape. She wasn't sure what was next, but she wasn't afraid to find out anymore. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe it wasn't about having everything figured out. Maybe it was about taking the first step, trusting that the rest would fall into place. And so, in that moment, she made a choice. She was going to trust him. She was going to trust herself. And most importantly, she was going to trust that the connection between them wasn't a mistake. That maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. The following weeks felt like a whirlwind. Emma had made the decision to trust Alexander, to open herself up in a way she hadn't in years. At first, it was a challenge. She was still cautious, still holding on to the remnants of her old life, the one where everything was under control, where she didn't let anyone get too close. But with Alexander, she found herself letting go, piece by piece, day by day. The connection between them grew stronger, and Emma began to realize that maybe she didn't need to have everything figured out. Maybe life wasn't meant to be controlled, but lived. They spent more time together, going on long walks through the city, having quiet dinners, and sharing the kind of conversations that felt effortless. Alexander had a way of making her feel seen, heard, and understood. He wasn't pushy, but he was there, steadily, consistently. And with every passing day, Emma felt herself softening, her walls crumbling just a little bit more. One evening, after a quiet dinner at a new Italian restaurant they had discovered, Alexander took her hand as they walked through the streets, the city lights casting a soft glow around them. "There's something I want to talk to you about," he said, his voice gentle but serious. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to be so serious, so she turned to look at him, her pulse quickening. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her. "I don't want to rush you," he said, "but I need you to know how much you mean to me. I've never felt like this before. And I know it's been quick, and maybe we're moving faster than either of us expected, but I can't ignore it. I can't pretend that what we have isn't real." Emma felt a rush of emotion. She had been thinking the same thing, wondering if it was just her feelings or if he truly felt the same way. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing the sincerity in his voice, made her chest tighten. "I'm not saying I'm ready to jump into anything, or that I have all the answers," he continued, "but I need you to know that I'm serious about this, Emma. About us." Emma looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. She wasn't sure what to say. Was she ready for this? Was she ready to fully let go and give herself to someone again? She had spent so many years building walls around her heart, protecting herself from the possibility of getting hurt. But now, standing here with Alexander, she realized that maybe she had been protecting herself from something even more dangerous, never allowing herself to experience love, to experience the depth of connection that he was offering. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. "I don't know what the future holds," she said softly, "but I know that right now, I want to be with you." I want to see where this goes, and I want to trust you, Alexander." The words felt like a weight lifted off her shoulders, as if by speaking them, she was finally letting herself believe in the possibility of something real. Alexander's eyes softened, and he gently cupped her face in his hands. "You don't have to have all the answers, Emma," he whispered. "You just have to trust that we're on this journey together. And that's enough for me." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words wash over her. She was scared, but she also felt a profound sense of peace. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know where this would lead. But for the first time in a long time, she was ready to find out. With Alexander by her side, she was ready to take that leap into the unknown, to embrace the future, whatever it might hold. As they stood there, holding each other under the city lights, Emma knew that her life was no longer just about control. It was about connection. It was about trust. And maybe, just maybe, it was about love. As the weeks passed, Emma felt more and more like she was living a life she hadn't expected, a life she hadn't known she wanted until Alexander had come into it. The uncertainty, the fear, the walls she had spent so many years building around her heart, slowly, they began to crumble. She was still cautious, still guarded in some ways, but with him, it felt easier to let go. There were moments when the weight of everything they had shared hit her, moments when she would catch herself staring at him, realizing how deeply she had fallen for him without even knowing it was happening. He was everything she had never imagined she would need, and yet, he felt like exactly what she had been searching for all along. As time went on, they settled into a rhythm, a quiet understanding that they were in this together. They spent weekends exploring new places, enjoying each other's company without any pressure, just two people trying to figure out where they fit in each other's lives. And every day, the bond between them grew stronger. One evening, Alexander took her out to a small park near her apartment, a place she had never noticed before despite walking by it many times. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the benches and trees. It was peaceful, quiet, a perfect contrast to the chaos of the city they had both grown so used to. They sat on one of the benches, their shoulders brushing, and for the first time in a while, Emma felt completely at peace. "You're quiet tonight," Alexander said softly, glancing at her. "What's on your mind?" She looked up at him, the weight of his question sinking in. She had been thinking a lot about the future, about what this meant for them, about what she was ready to give. She had always been so focused on the next step, the next achievement, that she had forgotten to just be in the moment. With him, though, she was learning how to be present, to trust that whatever came next would come in its own time. "I'm thinking about how far we've come," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "How much I've changed since I met you." Alexander smiled, his eyes full of warmth and understanding. "You've always been capable of this, Emma," he said, his voice reassuring. "You just needed someone who would help you see it. Someone who would show you that it's okay to let go." Emma's heart swelled at his words. She had never thought of herself that way, capable of change, capable of opening up. But here she was, doing it. "I don't know what's going to happen next," she continued, "but I know that I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm not afraid of us anymore." Alexander took her hand in his, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Neither am I," he said softly. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. And that's all I need." Emma smiled, the weight of her fears and uncertainties lifting as she looked into his eyes. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. It wasn't about having all the answers, or knowing what the future held. It was about the trust they had built, the love they were learning to share, and the understanding that they didn't have to have everything figured out to make it work. As they sat together on that bench, surrounded by the calm of the evening, Emma realized that life wasn't about control or perfection. It was about the moments they shared, the choices they made, and the people who walked beside them. And with Alexander by her side, she knew that whatever came next, she would be ready for it. Because sometimes, the most important thing wasn't knowing the answers, it was simply having the courage to take the next step, together.